with some things that you want to get some answers to before we start on our topic for today. And whoever has not asked a question recently, let's get you guys asking some questions. If you don't ask questions, then asking questions is the best way for you to get some, make some progress faster. We know that the guys who are asking questions and participating a lot are making a lot more progress at a higher speed.
I've got a question that's a little off topic from the normal marketing and everything.
All right, go ahead, Aaron.
So we, pre-COVID, we tried to bring in jujitsu classes like Mile High Karate has. One option that we pursued, and it didn't work out. The guy was 4 hours late to our first meeting and then an hour early to our second meeting. So we were just going to sublet some of our space and have him do his own little program and just collect rent. My concern with bringing on an instructor that's not part of the organization is that there's so many horror stories of outside instructors coming in and then feeling like they can just walk away with students and then become a competitor. So I'm wondering how you guys manage to do that and find good, loyal instructors.
Well, I think there's more than just that reason I don't like the sublet space deal. There's lots and lots of reasons why that's a really bad idea. Master Oliver.
I apologize, Master Moody. Who is talking? Because I don't see anybody.
It's Aaron. Aaron doesn't.
Yeah, Aaron apologized ahead, sir. He's not able to have video today. So,
Okay.
Yeah, but as far as the question of, I guess the question is, how do you find loyal instructors, and make sure that you've got instructors? And if you're going to add another program like jujitsu on, and your main style is not jujitsu, then you'd have to hire them from outside. The main answer for how to get instructors is we want to be able to build them up from internally. And I think we've got some videos, Master Oliver, of Grandmaster Smith talking about that in detail that we could probably refer everybody to. That's probably in our topic today, because that's a little bit longer topic, that are on the member site.
Yeah.
But generally
the program.
Yes, sir. And generally the sublet idea, having somebody sublet space in my school, I've always been completely a non-fan of. It never really works out to be profitable, and it's always a hassle. And it could go from that as the best case to the worst case, a horror story.
Yeah.
So
in other words, just don't do it.
Never heard a good story.
Yeah. There's never been a good outcome there. And the pennies that you make from that are never worth it. It's chasing after pennies that you should be spending time doing other stuff.
And he said something at the beginning of his comments. I thought I heard him say, like Mile High Karate was doing.
Yeah, do jujitsu like Mile High Karate's doing.
He never ever had a separate jujitsu program that I'm aware of.
Yeah, well, maybe I missed something. Why would there be a good thing to add an additional style? And well, what was the beginning premise? That if I
think.
So my question, I thought I had seen that you guys in Colorado had done some, or added in some groundwork to your curriculum. And I mean, I'm interested because until COVID, I was taking jujitsu classes. So kind of, I get to bring it in and then also don't have to pay for my own training.
Well, forget that last piece, because that's nonsensical. Well, no, I mean, let's start with this. So we started with a style that was, for want of a simpler way to say it, kind of bastardized Taekwondo combined with kickboxing, right? Or modernized Taekwondo, American karate, however you want to phrase it. If we wanted to steal from Bruce Lee, we could call it Jeet Kune Do-ish. But And then over the years, we added Eskrima and Kali, different elements of that. We added traditional Okinawan weapons, bow staff and kamas and one thing or another. We added some Aikido type of content and some jujitsu content. I do think there's a big difference, though, in if you're teaching stand-up punching and kicking, you've got to be careful how you incorporate ground fighting type of stuff, and vice versa. If you're teaching predominantly Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think you've got to be careful how you incorporate stand-up. What I have seen, Aaron, and it's not a commentary against Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it's anything but taking like Taekwondo students and at one point or another kind of forcing them to go into full-on ground fighting type of stuff has a tendency to force a fairly high percentage of them out the door, because that's not why they were there to begin with. Master Smith and I had this extensive conversation with Danny Schulman, and the short version of that story was he has basically two paths through the school. People come in and they're doing kickboxing, like real Muay Thai kickboxing, and eventually they're forced to go into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or they come in through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and eventually they're forced to go into Muay Thai. And at the point where there's that transition, especially women going from stand-up to ground fighting, there's a huge point inflection of dropouts. And my argument with him was never force the issue. And his argument was, well, we're giving him a black belt in MMA. I said, well, okay, then give him a black belt in Thai, Muay Thai, and give him a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then if you could have a black belt in, having mastered both if you wanted to, or have each of the different ranks be fine. So trying to force that into the curriculum, I think, is always a bad idea, Aaron. But the other side of it is the way that we added Kali, Eskrima, traditional Okinawan, weaponry, et cetera, was never by bring in 5th degree black belt expert instructor, put him on payroll and have him teach separate classes in that. It was always take a chunk of my staff and have somebody who was really good, more recently like Apollo Ladra, I think originally Angel Cabalas, if that's the right name. We had hired him for who was a very well-known, respected, person in the Filipino community, and had him teach all of my staff for a period of time, and then had, like a designated staff member who, went to him periodically and trained, brought it back and integrated it. Some of the weaponry, teaching kama was basically, let's do a Taekwondo form and add a kama in your hand. And then let's go watch, was attack Tadashi Yamashita and, some of the guys who are really good. Let's go watch and mimic their films. So it's really not very difficult to take an element of another style if you're already at a high level in something, assuming it's not too far off base. Now, I'm making no representation that take a weekend seminar with Carlos Machado and suddenly you're qualified to teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, any more than I would, suggest a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stylist take a weekend seminar with me or Master Smith and they, are qualified to teach Taekwondo or kickboxing. But you can take elements, you can take the stick curriculum, and it's pretty easy to pick up elements of that and implement it, and you can implement it from the bottom up. So you can, teach all your black belts up to a certain level of that curriculum, and then have them teach it at the, starting at the green belt leadership or whatever it is. Then you can gradually overlay additional elements as you create internal mastery. Does that help a little bit, Aaron?
Yeah, that does help, because we'd said the sublet option obviously was not a good idea. We didn't pursue that. And I also don't like teaching something I don't feel like I know well enough to get somebody hurt. But yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense because then I can take what I'm just learning in my own class and then start working with black belts instead.
Yeah.
Slowly. Okay,
Well,
thank you.
Well, and we all know that single stick Kali, teaching it to green belts is a pretty simple thing for a black belt to learn, a fairly simple thing to turn around. It certainly gets into curriculum that's complicated to teach in one thing or another. Teaching sophisticated BJJ ground fighting, by somebody who's had limited experience themselves, I think is a really bad idea. And I was always very disappointed early in the UFC with all these, many of my own students, there was a cover shot that Mark Lazier was on, but also one of my students, Jerry Elfson, surprisingly was on the corner of it. And it was grappling expert Jerry Ellison, where he was one of my second degree black belts in Taekwondo, and had taken a weekend seminar with Carlos Machado and suddenly was billing himself as a grappling expert. So I think I always think that kind of stuff is extremely disheartening.
And Master Oliver, if I could give him a quick synopsis of how I got all of our, as we expanded our leadership program, we wanted to have more, because we were training material we had linked out all the way to 5th degree black belt. So, and we started teaching some of those leadership techniques at level 1 of black belt training. And so all we did was basically have a beginner level of whatever we were teaching. And before we ever taught the bow staff, we had all of our instructors learn the bow staff first. And then they got good enough where we could then start teaching basic level 1 while my staff was still learning basic level 2 per se. And of course, being black belts, they pick it up so much quicker than our beginners who are learning level 1. And to get from level 1 to level 2, you then take it to another level. So my black belts were now working on level 3 and teaching level 1 and 2. And then they eventually got to the black belt level of it and they were teaching level 3 of it, which is the advanced level. So it's kind of a growing into all of those stages. Jiu-jitsu is one of those that I wouldn't ever put in that format because it's not something you can go learn that quickly. So unless we had one of our instructors who had a brown belt or even a purple belt who knew some basics so we could teach a level 1 level of jiu-jitsu, then that would work. But otherwise, I wouldn't even suggest putting jiu-jitsu in the curriculum. You can always do Aikido or joint locks, or we even had a judo, but we didn't do judo. We never ranked anybody in any of these. We just taught them a couple basic throws, how to fall, and a few things like that. So it was mostly, a basic level of some of those other arts.
Okay, yeah, that helps a lot. Thank you.
And to be fair, if you're teaching us a hard style Taekwondo Shotokan or one thing or another, and you're teaching a hard style weapon, fairly simple one at that, it's much different than if we were trying to incorporate, wushu sword form or, something that was soft style oriented to give a different take on it. So it's, it depends upon, how big a leap you're taking. It's why I always like to go from, the Taekwondo to the Eskrima and Kali material is always good because it had a completely different feeling movement and it was fun. But at the early stages, I can teach a 6-year-old, here's a stick, whack the stick like this, and then go here, high, low, and then do that. I mean, it's a really easy transition. So you do have to pick your battles.
Everything should be complementary.
Yes.
Complementary with what you do.
And I never recommend, or rarely, I guess, having a separate curriculum path. Master Moody in your organization with ATA, it became the thing to do with many was to have a Taekwondo program and then have a separate Krav Maga program and then have a separate cardio kickboxing program and then whatever else might be a tag on. I always think that's a distraction, as long as you're teaching something that has, a broad enough appeal. If you don't add another style and get more students, what happens is you get better at marketing what you're doing. And having 3 curriculums just makes everything 3 times more complicated than having one.
Well, and as we approach online marketing, as we're talking about that very frequently, what ends up happening is it screws up all your online marketing. And so you've got to massively, if you think about it, if you're selling hamburgers and you're selling steak, those are 2 different things. And so which one are you going to be? And you got to get your image out right, even though they're both food, they're different things. I mean, they're different types of businesses. So you could do both. There's restaurants that do both and do both successfully, but it's a different job. They're 2 different jobs. So I think to me, that's a good example of it. And by the way, if you ever watch the McDonald's Founder, the movie Founder, which is about Ray Kroc, which you all should watch.
Which is very good. Very good.
The beginning of that movie, when he started McDonald's, that was exactly what some of the issues were. And that's probably all we need to say about that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Anyway, other questions before we move on?
I just want to confirm, sir, that Annapolis is September 17th and 18th of this year.
I will go back and reconfirm everything. The date that we published is the date that is penciled in at their end. The event that we have in Breckenridge for the Black Belt retreat, given COVID, given all that other stuff, actually decided to be closed for what's called mud season. So now we're looking for an alternative. We have a good alternative, but we're looking for a good alternative. So we will reconfirm that. As you know, 2020 and now 2021 is becoming one of those periods where it's difficult to plan.
Okay.
Anyway.
Hopefully we're on.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. The other kink with Annapolis is to make sure they're back to doing tours by then. So, and again, that's one.
I can do a tour for you guys.
Oh, that's a fair statement. Yeah. And Matt Smith is Commander Cal up in that neck of the woods now, or is he somewhere else? I thought he got transferred.
He was my classmate.
Yeah, that's you mentioned that.
Yeah, he's at the Pentagon.
Is he still at the Pentagon? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, there we can.
He was in Afghanistan or somewhere like that he just sent me something from that he was over there for a couple weeks or a month or something.
That's what I saw that was in the back of my head, but I didn't know how permanent or temporary that was. If you haven't caught up with him recently, Sal, I mean, he's a serious badass for a little Asian guy. I got to tell you.
Yeah.
A little Asian guy.
Okay, never mind. Let's move on from there.
Well, I mean, sitting at a table at lunch and hearing war stories from that guy, I'm going, I've been in martial arts for 50 years and this guy's making me feel like a wimp.
Bruce Lee's pretty good for a little Asian guy.
Well, I was talking about all the bomb demolition and all that stuff. I did see an interview with Joe Louis one time, and they were asking him about what would happen in a fight with him and Bruce Lee, and he said, "I'm the heavyweight champion. I weigh 220. I would have picked him up and beat." I mean, it was 120 versus 220 is an interesting matchup. If you saw that movie, by the way, which was very controversial. What's his daughter's name?
Shannon Lee.
Shannon, yeah. She didn't like it, but the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the depiction of Bruce, I believe correctly, Matt Smith, you kind of enjoyed that one. But basically it was based on a true story where somebody had asked Bruce Lee if he could beat up Muhammad Ali. And, his basic answer was, I don't even want to think about that. His fist is the size of my head. But if I did, I'd have to take out his knees or something. And then they extrapolated it in Bruce Lee, in a braggadocious way, saying he was better than Muhammad Ali, which is not at all what he said. He was very, very, very appreciative of and studied every move of Muhammad Ali, among others. But certainly he had a library of boxing greats that he studied every move. So anyway, on that note, moving on, other questions and thoughts? No questions? Well, that's easy enough. Okay. Well, let's get into our main focus here. Brief survey. We are now starting off March, having come off of February. How is everybody's enrollment flow? Are you back to comparable or better to what you were last year, or are there any challenges? So, Paul, you're in good shape. Bruce, how's your enrollment flow? Bruce, good. Sal, enrollment flow good?
Getting better. We're working on it with Grandmaster Smith.
Okay. Does anybody feel like they're having any big gaps in getting lead flow coming in? Stephen, how's your lead flow?
Very good, sir. Very
Okay.
good, especially with the just added elite, and so it's true. It opened it up. Yeah.
Yep. There you go. Yeah, they're doing a great job for everybody. And and don't expect every week of every month to, for them to have great results. Yeah, there's going to be down periods and up periods, and they're paying attention and tweaking and tuning. So,
And,
go ahead.
and it's also true, like you taught us that, like the leads aren't as good as the ones that I get from Go To Karate on the website where they went, and we got to work through more to get the same, but you still end up with enough that make it more worthwhile.
Yeah, as long as the ROI is good, that's what you want. One thing I would tell everybody that's using Elite is make sure on the thank you page, it's showing your website too. Because what you want is after somebody fills out the form, it drives them also to then fill out the form on your site. It's a double affirmation, and your leads it'll help the leads that you get from Facebook to what we find is those have a better show rate.
Was that just telling? You mean just?
Yeah, they almost always do that automatically. So the thank you page that they set up for the landing page has the website on it. Is another way for them to follow up after you've already got the lead from the Facebook lead. But what you should see is a lot of your Facebook leads will also come back in through your website, either because they found you. It should enhance your regular organic lead flow and your AdWords lead flow if you're doing that right. But then this is a third way to enhance your lead flow, and that makes it so you end up having if they do both. Fill out the lead page on for your Facebook lead, then they also fill it out on your website. They're more likely to show up.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's shift topics. I had two topics that I wanted to get to. The first one we'll try to keep it short, and it's a downer. So, if you've been watching the news, have everybody been watching the sudden downfall of Andrew Cuomo? If you haven't, go pay a little bit of attention to it. And I'll give you a couple of assignments. Assignment number one is go Google New York State law on sexual harassment and look at what the specific language is. And then, by the way, go look up your own state. But two, go back, if you haven't paid attention to it, go back to the genesis of not the nursing home side of the scandal, but the sexual harassment side of the scandal, of what's going on. And as you look at how rapidly this thing has unfolded, I want you to notice one thing. You have one side of the scandal is presumably complicit in 15,000 deaths in nursing homes. We could have a conversation about whether that's a fair charge or unfair or whatever. But regardless of that, then we immediately, and that was, frankly, not that big of a of scandal generally. But then all of a sudden we had a Me Too-ish sexual harassment workplace situation, and then it got to be 2 and 3, and it became this massive maelstrom of crisis for the governor. And from a standpoint of two things, I think are worth you paying attention to. And I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not taking a political stance on all this. What I'm trying to do is get you to, and nor am I, trying to say that Cuomo should be executed, arrested, kicked out of office, or have any other opinion about it, other than look at the news cycle and look at what's going on and think about it as it applies to your school. And there's lots of other examples, but this is to me has been a real good one up until accuser number 6 of something to pay attention to for your school. Has anybody paid attention to what the accusers have actually said that he did? Number 1, 2, 3, 4. Other than you hated him and so it must be true, or you loved him and therefore you give him the benefit of the doubt. Anybody pay attention to what they've actually said? See it, and by the way, the news hasn't paid attention to what they actually said. Sal, and so if you dig into it just a little bit, one accusation was that the governor hugged a staff member. Another accusation was a staffer, as the governor walked through the office, was getting up, and he held her hand and helped her get up and then kissed her hand. And another accusation was, which was the big one, the headline grabbing primary person who's talked about it up until now, was that he was having a conversation in a what seemed like, if I recall correctly, an informal setting. And basically he was asking her questions, which feels to me like creepy old man asking young girl, does she want to date him? But it was like beating around the bush, how old a man have you ever gone out with? Here's how young a women that I, consider going out with. Are you dating anybody currently? It was that type of thing. Never actually getting around to asking her out, as I recall the story. And, but take what those accusations are. So in a workplace environment, awkwardly asking questions about somebody's personal life with the intent of asking her out. Anybody, with half an IQ recognizes this is him beating around the bush about asking her out. And apparently he never got to that point. And then you have, held a person's hand and kissed her hand, and then you had hugged somebody. And there was one or two others, but they were all up until accuser number 6, if I recall, all within that kind of vein, right? Not Harvey Weinstein, creepy stuff, do this and I'll get you a job, and, or if you don't do this, I'll ruin your career. None of them, certainly up until number 6, had any implication of, if you like your job, you'll do this, or if you want a promotion, do this for me, you'll get a promotion. None of them had any kind of in implicit or explicit, that I saw, quid pro quo built in. Add to that the law in New York, and again, I'm not a lawyer, and I, take it with a grain of salt, but as I read it, the sexual harassment law in New York, as signed into law by Andrew Cuomo last year, basically says is the intent of the accused is irrelevant. It says the subjective feeling of the accuser is what determines, as self-reported, is what determines sexual harassment or not. So everybody hear what I'm saying? So if somebody makes an accusation, the accusation is, at this point in time, I felt this way because of that person. And therefore, that's the definition of sexual harassment. Everybody hearing all of this so far? Now, frankly, from my perspective, this is just deja vu. Because if you've been in the business long enough, in the 1990s, there was a dramatic shift when it came to dealing with children, and it impacted martial arts schools, it impacted daycares and one thing or another. And what happened was it went from be accused, view evidence, decide guilt or innocence, to the language at the time was kids don't lie and believe all kids. And what it was meant by that basically was guilty even if proven innocent, with anything related to kids' sexual molestation, whether they felt uncomfortable in the environment, attributed that discomfort to something that was said or done, felt like they were touched inappropriately, one thing or another. And none of this is to say child molestation is a horrible thing. But what we all know, I think, at this point, but the inflection point was, if I remember correctly, early to mid 90s, is it went to a point where didn't matter how you responded, didn't matter how you defended yourself. If an accusation was made and was published in the media, you were guilty, and even if proven innocent. And frankly, in most cases, you were out of business upon the accusation being made, regardless of what the ultimate outcome was, right? We're now in the sexual harassment era where the exact same statement is true, where you're guilty even if proven innocent. And you're in a situation, if my analysis is even halfway fair, in a state like New York, where your guilt or innocence can't be proven because you're guilty based upon the subjective feeling of an accuser, which is unprovable. So even if that wasn't their subjective feeling at the time, having made the accusation puts you in a situation where you're guilty even if proven innocent. So regardless of my feelings about Andrew Cuomo, and if I were to have my guess, by the way, once accuser 6 came out and said what she said, I'd be shocked if there's not another 10 and they get progressively more graphic and unacceptable. But what's, I think, the takeaway of the story is look at what the first few actually said. Look at the news coverage that was absent in almost all cases, what they actually said and any objective analysis of it, and look at how that applies to your business. So it's again, I mean, as an additional example, Krista, you're up in Seattle, there was a great interview with Bill and Melinda Gates that I saw a while back, and they're talking to Bill and Melinda about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and what they're doing and the different things they're doing around the world. It was a very softball interview. And then the interviewer gets into their relationship and what a wonderful couple they are. And by the way, how did you meet, and one thing another. And Bill Gates, on camera, against the advice of advisors, I'm sure, because he caught himself, says, "Oh, we met at work," and then stops mid-sentence, smirks, cringes a little bit, and then says, "Back when that was okay." Because the way that Bill and Melinda Gates met was Melinda worked in the marketing department at Microsoft. And presumably, there was never any situation of Bill Gates forcing himself on Melinda. If I had to guess, Melinda sought him out more than anything. And there's all kinds of interesting and cute stories about their courtship and being in different cities and going to the same movie and then talking for hours about their takeaway from the movie and so forth. But it's a really interesting example about, in today's world, Bill's kicked off the board of directors. They're shouting about taking his stock options away from him. They're firing him from his own company, one thing or another. And in fact, not too many years after Bill and Melinda Gates, Jack Welch, who was the best CEO of GE in its history. And since Jack Welch was fired, GE has gone into a tailspin and has done horrible ever since. Certainly increasingly poorly, maybe to be more fair about it. But the story of Jack Welch was he's the CEO, chairman of board, I forget specifically, of GE, legendary CEO, read many books on management, one thing or another. Such a legendary CEO, the Harvard Business Review wants to write an article on him and also then turn it into a biography. The writer to be biographer is female, who they end up dating, and then I forget if he was divorced already, but anyway, they end up dating. He gets divorced. They end up getting married. They're still happily married and writing together, one thing or another. But the fact that he's dating the biographer from Harvard Business Review gets him fired from the board of GE, which he had created many billions of dollars in profits for. So I think it's a very important thing where, regardless of where you come down on any of this stuff politically, is as a business owner, it's a very scary operating environment. And it's a zero tolerance environment. It's also an environment where you've got to think long and hard about staff training. You've got to have a behind the doors zero tolerance policy, as well as an obviously forward facing zero tolerance policy. You've got to be cameras everywhere. There can never be anything that happens in the school that you haven't documented. Cloud backup, keep it forever. Pay the couple $100 a month or whatever trivial amount of money it is to keep that stuff. But you've got to create, and it's not so much about, it used to be about creating an environment where culturally all of your staff were good human beings and behaved appropriately and all that other kind of stuff. And that's still extremely important. It's why hiring people who are egocentric, why hiring people who are narcissists, why hiring people with a power complex, all of that stuff has always been a bad idea. It was a bad idea in 1973. It's a bad idea today. But you got to overlay that with a complete environment where none of that stuff is in any way tolerated. I always had a policy where if you're on staff, you're not allowed to date students, parents, any of that stuff. Socialize with any of that, period, end of sentence. I don't care if you're both second degree black belts and now you're on staff and they're not on staff. That's still verboten. Now it's got to be staff dating. I mean, I had problems in the 80s with staff dating staff, but now staff dating staff, it doesn't matter what's going on. That's got to be off the table. And you've got to be extremely clear about behavior outside of work, about dress codes and behavior in work. You've got to be extremely clear about all that stuff, to the point of being irrationally unreasonable, because we're now in an irrationally unreasonable world. Does that make sense to everybody? The pendulum has swung. The pendulum needed to swing. The pendulum swung too far, right? Until it comes back to rational, you've got to be unreasonably irrational, and there is no gray area. Does that make sense to everybody? So, what used to pass as courtesy is now sexual harassment, and what used to pass for evidence is irrelevant at this point when it comes to this stuff. And by the way, we've been in that environment for years with kids. Is the iteration of the thought is enough to put you out of business. And now we're in that environment with the sexual harassment stuff. The iteration of the thought is enough to put you out of business, and you're guilty even if proven innocent, because there's no such thing as proving yourself innocent anymore. Is that making sense to everybody? So I hate to be on a downer, but that's the environment we're in. And again, I mean, it's very fascinating to watch something like the implosion of Andrew Cuomo, and especially to note that very little of the news actually went into much of the detail about what he was being accused of. And, what number 6 accuses him of is pretty damning, if it's true. And it has nothing to do with, with feeling a certain way. But again, guilty until proven innocent has gone out the windows. So you should be very, very aware of that. Questions or thoughts on that before we move on?
I would just say, sir, a lot of it, and Sal Comento, of course, will be able to relate to this too. It's stuff that way back in my military officer days, we just got to do all the same stuff, right? Like being careful not to, like I have today a female staff member here is the only other staff member in the building at the time, right? Like she can't come in this office and close the door and, stuff like that. Just, just really being careful. That's all.
Mm. Yeah. 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 I mean,
it's good to have those cameras in the school all over, is really not even your staff, but if some other parent accuses somebody, then you've got something to reference to either, confirm or deny.
Yeah. Although we're in a guilty, even if proven innocent environment. So all of that stuff is useful, but ultimately it's irrelevant. Part of it is, frankly, and this is a longer discussion, it's about being very careful about not burning bridges, and it's being very careful about just having good human relationship skills. Because once somebody is pissed off, all kinds of interesting things can come out of their mouth. I've had not sexual type of stuff, but I've had many employees who cussed my name, for the year after they were terminated or left in a huff, that came back several years later and said, well, I'm sorry, that was this external thing going on, and it was the greatest learning experience in my life. And frankly, I wish I had stayed. And what happened after, in my career was not nearly what was happening with me. But people say all kinds of things in anger. My policy has always been never to burn a bridge, always to, whether somebody's being fired or somebody is leaving, to always have them, celebrated out the door, not, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And really to make to try to create an environment where, even if performance is substandard and you have to address substandard performance, it has nothing to do with the, professional, personal interaction as humans. So you got to be aware of all of that. An awful lot of there's studies that go way back about malpractice suits, and the lessons from those were clear. People who file malpractice suits file it because the doctor was an asshole. It doesn't have anything to do with the competence or incompetence of the doctor. The doctor who's been in practice for 52 years and he's not up to date on anything, and he's the nice guy who everybody loves, doesn't ever get sued. The Harvard educated triple, PhD, MD, world's leading surgeon who is full of himself and he's an asshole, he's the guy that gets sued. So it has nothing to do with competence. It has everything to do with relationship. So you've got to be aware of a lot of these things are people feel unappreciated. And by the way, a lot of them are creepy old men behaving inappropriately or vice versa. But, it's a great thing that Harvey Weinstein hopefully will never see the light of day, among a whole bunch of others. Now, in practice, almost all of that, I've got to tell you, back in the 90s when I was doing the MBA, the corporate world was way ahead of this. It seems like Hollywood and politicians, took an awful long time to get caught up because, frankly, they're in environments with low accountability. The level of tolerance in the corporate environment really went to nil 30 years ago or so forth. Yes, again, the military has had a lot of comeuppance on different things, but the level of tolerance there as well, is essentially zero. Okay, so let's go to happier topics unless there's any follow-up from that. No, sorry for depressing everybody, but it is the business we're in. Write that down somewhere. Guilty even if proven innocent, right? Um, it is one of those topics that, you know, once it's in print, it never comes out of print. So let's move on. Let's talk about marketing. The good news is, self-reported, we're hearing over and over and over again that schools did better in February 2021 than they did in February 2020. Reminding you that February 2020 miraculously was prior to COVID shutdowns. We're now celebrating the 1-year anniversary of 2 weeks to flatten the curve. But the thing that I think that 2020 did to all of us that was a very bad outcome is we got sloppy on our marketing in a couple of ways, because many of the venues that we're used to fully exploiting got shut down. And then we ended up, in many cases, dependent upon Facebook and Google. And prior to pandemic, going back to February 2020 and before, is, my biggest lament about the industry is shiny new bauble, the bright new thing, and people getting fixated on social media, Instagram, tweeting and crap, and not sticking to the fundamental basics of all the different stuff that we know works, right? The good news is Facebook and specifically Elite Digital on that side, Rev Marketing and Google search, search traffic and pay-per-click traffic, but Rev did a marvelous job with Master Moody working with them, is both sides really stepped up and filled the gap of the live event marketing, all the kind of other stuff that we had going on. The sloppiness is, I don't see right now nearly the level of hustle that I'd like to see on the have 500 rack card placements out, have 100 bandit signs out, have the rotating banner on the school every couple of months, have the big kick up blower guy that's out in front of the school, and if you get smacked by the authorities, put it out at 5, take it back at back down at 9. If you don't have an electric outlet, get a little generator to run the thing. Renting the blow up balloon on the top of the school. That type of grassroots marketing seems like we've all gotten really sloppy in 2020, and that stuff started coming off the plate, right? The second thing that came off the plate, and it didn't need to, because there were a lot of ways to accomplish it otherwise. But one thing that came off the plate was being really, really good at referral marketing. We know that most referrals come from promoting events for which the students are comfortable bringing their friends to. Those who shifted to doing a bunch of that kind of stuff by Zoom, if they were unable to do it in the school, and or doing it out in the park if they were able to do it outside but not inside, still maintained good referral numbers. And by the way, there's a lot of different ways to get referrals. What generally doesn't work is give everybody a guest pass and say, hey, bring your friends. What does work, several of our members have done books, giving all of your students 3 or 4 of your books, with making sure there's a call to action about coming into school printed in the book, giving each of them 3 or 4 to pass along, giving the parents the book to pass along. That's certainly a good tool. Doing doing free reports on, the way to maintain your child's emotional health during COVID lockdowns, for instance, writing up reports, giving it to them as pass alongs for their friends. Things like that work nicely too.
What book are you saying, sir?
Say it again.
I didn't want to interrupt you. What books are you talking about that you're handing out?
Well, no, I mean, a lot of our members have done their own.
I can show you. Here's one from this is Amanda Olson's. Here's her book, Create Happy and Homework Zone. This is Master Middleton. Here's
Yeah.
her. Amanda Olson's got another. She actually did 2 different books.
Yeah.
So she wrote her own book. This one was she's a good example because this one was ghost written. She wrote some seed paragraphs, and then the rest was taken care of for her. And then she actually wrote the whole thing here. Grandmaster Del Castillo is doing 2 books right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So
And by the way, we're not talking about doing. I can't read the title, but good that you're holding up yours.
which one do you want me to hold up? Like,
Yeah,
okay,
good, yeah, good, Sal. Good. But now my question is, so like with Amanda Olson's book there, the Parenting Survival Kit, I think is what the title is.
Parenting Survival Guide.
Parents. And by the way, Paul Pendergast did a great book too on parenting, among others. But you know, if you had, and by the way, this doesn't have to be big, 50 pages, 75 pages, you know, just printed book. But what we're not talking about is something that's a martial art topic, you know, the ultimate guide to Shotokan karate with 982 photos. June Reed did a series of those on all the Taekwondo forms. See, that would be worthless for, you know, for marketing. But what's useful for marketing, the Parent Survival Guide, well, now, you know, my question to Amanda, and she may have done it, and Jan, same for you, but, you know, does every parent have 4 copies? And is there the coupon for the free month in the uniform in the front cover, and is it printed and bound into the book? And so do they have that as pass along for their friends? Does every school, every one of the teachers in every local school have a copy? Do all the principals have copies? You know, are there copies that donated to the libraries in the elementary, middle, high schools, et cetera? But see, that as a pass along, right, is what we know is most of your staff stink at, what Chet Holmes called the stadium pitch, what more commonly is called an elevator pitch, of if they walked up to somebody and sat down at their table in Starbucks and wanted to pitch them on training in martial arts, most of your staff would do a horrible job. I absolutely guarantee it. And now you take the average mom of a white belt and think that she's going to do a good job of pitching her circle of influence, or pitching her friends and family on bringing their kids down because you gave her a business card with a stamp 2 free lessons. It's a fool's errand, right? However, that same mom would be fine with, hey, you know, Joey just started lessons. You won't believe how great this place is. And by the way, you know, the owner there is named Master Lappin. She's been doing this forever, but she wrote a great book on creating character with kids. I thought you might find it valuable. See, that's an easy thing to happen, right? And then the transition of that person calling you. Now, you know, she may give out 3 of them and 1 of them call you. It's not going to be all of them, but it's a great referral tool, right? The mistake I see made is it's not bound in the book 22 places on a good reason for them to contact you. So you got to have call to actions all through the book. You should probably also have something about the size of the book inserted into the book as a separate coupon, and one thing or another. It's, the book itself doesn't necessarily spur action. You got to get them to take action. But it's just one example of 12 different referral systems that we can use, right? So having the birthday party on Zoom if you can't do it in person, having the self-defense day, having the parents having a class, having the kids do the, Master Smith, you like the glow chuck things. You could do that on Zoom if you had to do that in Zoom. You could do that in the park if you had to do that in the park. So, having a whole bunch of different things every month based on different segments of your student body that makes them comfortable with bringing their friends and then using that as a referral tool. The other thing that we know went sideways was a lot of people were doing a really great job. It's always been my absolute favorite thing, is directly into elementary schools, doing PE Teach for the Day, doing after school enrichment programs, before school enrichment programs, being at their carnival, et cetera. And what happened mentally for many of us who said, well, their door is locked and the kids are at home doing class, pretending to do class on Zoom while they're playing video games. So how, which is, by the way, my commentary on the incompetence of our public school systems. I'm so disgusted at this point, I can't see straight. But the reality is there was still a lot of opportunity. In fact, there was probably more opportunity because they shut down all the enrichment things. They shut down the ability for people to come into the school, even if the kids were in the school. But the kids, with everybody's knowledge, had more of a physical health workout, stay active need, had more mental issues and emotional issues with, being basically a shut-in for a year. And there were many more opportunities to reach out to those schools and do things virtually, if not in person. Here in Colorado, we wouldn't be able to do anything in person. Hell, a parent can't walk in the building because they keep the front doors locked, and will only let you talk to them by telephone. However, we've had great results with, do the PE teacher for the day on Zoom, run them to a landing page, get the information filled out, run the class via Zoom, and then follow up just like you would do on a PE teacher for the day to do registrations, and then use that to flip into an enrichment program. It could be 4 weeks or 3 weeks, couple days a week. The kids do class from Zoom and or the do at the park, and or they do it at your school, not the public school, or they have and probably even better, they have the option of 2 or 3 of those things. That's been working great too. So just because the situation changed a little bit doesn't mean we couldn't adapt and do that. But the key takeaway is it's got to be and always be the Parthenon. And even if you're hitting it out of the park so heavy on Facebook and Google that you can't keep up with the leads, all that means is you got to have a bunch of other stuff going on too, right? One of the biggest mistakes I ever made in marketing, I did it a couple of times. I wasn't bright enough to figure it out the first time. But one example was we were doing so much traffic from after school enrichment programs, overwhelmed to the point that it was physically impossible, or we hadn't adapted well enough yet to keep track of the intro flow, much less get around to enrolling all of them. And then we had another problem as the bubble was, finding time to renew all of them. I mean, it was that much traffic coming in. I had 5 schools that were dependent upon that as their primary source, to the point of not doing much else, even though I knew better. And then Columbine hit. And Columbine shut the schools down every bit as effectively in Colorado as did COVID, right? Now, unfortunately, then we didn't have the fallback of Zoom. So doing a virtual option wasn't an option. And doing an option at the park next to the school wasn't an option because they were equally as afraid of that. So it became a situation where that got shut down. But the thing is to get a whole bunch of different feeder programs going on. Another time we were so dependent upon newspaper and TV advertising, and it didn't just dip, it kind of fell off the cliff, and without having enough other things going on. So you've always got to have enough other things going on. Some of them can be passive and inexpensive. That's all that grassroots stuff that we have. We have it in the Fill Your School program. We have it in the Quick Start, all the things like the bandit signs and stuff. A lot of them can be community outreach. They can be working with other organizations. They can be something as simple and stupid as flyers going out on the, Papa John's or Pizza Hut delivery boxes, or something as sophisticated as a massive training program for your largest employer in town, where you run all of their employees through a program, and then they continue to promote your program at a discount for their employees. But there's such a wide palette of opportunity to do things. Don't get narrow niched into just 1 or 2 things that happen to be working right now. And as an organization, I think we were all really good at having a bunch of stuff going on a year ago, February, and then the last 12 months have put us into bad habits. Jan, what were you gonna say?
I have an idea that might work for the group. We just did it last night, and unfortunately, we were too late in doing it. But it's a way to get into the school system and also represent yourself as an expert or whatever.
Right.
So what we did is I did that seminar last night on the effects of COVID on children and just some tips for parents, how parents can help their kids through it with more touching and just blah, blah, blah. Anyways, we sent it last minute. We sent it to all the schools yesterday afternoon, and one school shared it with all their people. So
Good.
if you did, and we've done that before, we've done active shooter. And you know, if they share, when we did active shooter, it was back when the shootings were going on, and it got sent to the superintendent. He sent it to all the principals. They sent it to all their people. So you could take little things like effects with COVID or parenting or bully or whatever's going on, and you know, present yourself as someone who can help them. And then at the end of the seminar, you offer 2 free weeks and you get them in your school. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that. We're going to do that again and get it out to the schools with more notice this time.
Excellent. Excellent. And then of course that becomes a wonderful pivot for, them being involved in the free service you're doing for the community and providing the introductory program. And by the way,
everything Jan says about getting in the schools, you guys just copy the doggone things.
Yeah.
Because everything Jan says you should do. And then also on the Quick Start member site, I think we've got a video of Jan's process for getting in the schools. And you should start that back up, even if you're going to complain to us about schools being closed and everything. You can start a lot of that stuff virtually. So listen to that if you haven't. It's on the Quick Start member site, which I'm sure Bob has gone over with you. And we'll be happy to do again if you can't find it.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry, Master
Can I ask
Oliver.
a question?
Go ahead.
Jeff
Please do.
Ellis here.
Yeah.
Jan, can you tell us didn't record that on a video and send it to the schools? Is that how you did that?
No.
No, I did it. I just did a live seminar. So what I did is we sent a message to all the principals saying we are doing a live seminar or a seminar on Zoom. We gave them the information, the Zoom code. If you want to send it out to all your people, it's free of charge. It's a public service,
Got it.
event.
Okay. Okay. Now, Jan, let's fix your process.
Okay.
Okay. Well, whenever you do that, never send them the Zoom code. Send them the registration page.
Okay.
So you send them to a landing page.
Your data model.
Yeah, Zoom
Rachel,
web.
you can do that?
Normally we do. This one was just super last minute. So we were hoping a couple of the principals would get on super last minute. And that's the only reason why we normally we give them the code and say for the password, please register, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
I
that-
understand why. So you don't get the crazies on there.
no, well, no, but you're not going to do a job worth of crap on converting them into prospects if you don't have their contact information. But yes, you certainly don't want the crazies on there either, right? And running them to a registration page doesn't completely weed out the crazies, by the way. It does help. A big thing like that is you can do it in a webinar format as opposed to a live interactive meeting. There's pluses and minuses about both. I always prefer this format because I can see people and talk to them, and it's interactive, right? In a webinar format, what you have is you have the presenters, panelists, I think that's what they call them. But then everybody else is view only. Okay. The view only thing eliminates the crazies. What it doesn't do is allow you to interact individually with them. There is, the little forum where they can ask questions. And sometimes in a big enough group, you'll get crazies there as well. And there is a little area where they can raise their hand. In a webinar format, you do have the ability to promote them to panelists, and then they can ask questions and you can see them on video and so forth. The argument against a webinar is if you're going to have 20 kids in a PE Teach for the Day, I want to be able to talk to Joey and talk to Billy and make it interactive. The argument for a webinar format is if you're going to have 500 people show up, you're not going to be able to do that anyway, right? But you always run them to a registration page. Zoom on their webinar feature, they have you can self-create a webinar page within Zoom, and then once they register, it automatically sends them the link. You can tell it to make it, I forget their word, but evergreen. So basically what will happen is it'll automatically record the session, and anybody who enters on the link after it happened live will get to watch the recording. And also anybody who didn't show, I think it'll automatically send them an email inviting them to come watch the recording. So that's a nice feature. But for anything you do, so if I'm going to do like the equivalent, see, Jan, think of it this way. If I was going to go do PE Teach for the Day, I'm not going to go do PE Teach for the Day without registration, without permission slips, right? But so if I did the same number of people and they showed up on a webinar, they showed up at a Zoom meeting, I don't know who they are. I don't have name, address, phone number. And all I'm left with is, by the way, here's the website address, here's the phone number, give us a call. The percentage that are going to give you a call versus the percentage you'll get with the ability to follow up is dramatically different. Okay. That's the primary reason you want a registration page. And the registration page for an online event is much less objectionable even than a permission slip, you know, because you say, look, we don't want the general public showing up and, you know, crazy stuff happening and all that kind of stuff. We need everybody pre-registered, and then we're controlling who can have access to their video camera and so forth. But it all has to come through a pre-registration. We can't just send out the, you know, the live access link. That makes sense, Jen?
Yes, thank you very much.
You bet.
That's
You bet.
Oliver, because it was welcomed with open arms though by the school systems, you think there's opportunity there for her?
Oh, there's massive opportunity, because that's where I was going to first, until
Right.
until she explained it and my skin was crawling on how she actually answered it.
I just think the news media might be interested in hearing about that. And
That's the first place I was going.
Okay, sorry, sir.
Just no. Go ahead, Bob. Keep rolling. You're on a roll.
Yeah, no, that's all I was throwing out there, just to make sure that there was. I mean, it's the first step, right? And it's an open door, so see how if we can maybe balloon on that.
My guess is you could get on as a talk radio guest on all the talk radio stations, and explaining that topic. And if they put you on for 10 minutes, the natural tag is, we're doing this session for all the kids and parents and teachers in the local area. We've already done a couple of them, been very well received by the local principals and teachers. We're doing an open session for parents that will be live, this Thursday night, and we'll do another one on Saturday. As long as somebody registers, whether they're there live or not, they'll get the recording of it as well, along with the handouts. So it lets you promote that. I bet you could get on the local TV news and get them to promote it. I bet you could get the TV stations to run PSAs promoting it for you, especially if you put together a 30-second and a 60-second video for them. So it's something that you could get the newspapers to print it. Perhaps you could get the recording to the newspaper reporters, and they might even do an article about it, an article inspired by it, or an article about what you're doing specifically, which I'd obviously prefer. But you could roll it out to all the media. You certainly can roll it out to all of the, new media stuff, anything local, parenting blogs, parenting forums, the local parent. Here we have one that's very popular, where all the parents go to see events and things going on. It's something that merits an Eventbrite page of its own, with a registration page of its own on Eventbrite for parents to find. It can, and that it certainly can become an evergreen thing, even though you pretend it's not. But so it's something they can register for, show up live. It could easily be when they show up live, that's the recording. You don't have to do it live every time. Does this give you some ideas, Jan?
Sir, I have another to add to that. I like the whole idea with Master Weapon. What if we all team up or whatever it is, like say Master Lappin and I, because we're doing this on Zoom, let's say she's the child expert and I am the martial arts child expert, and we help each other. There's like 2 or 3 experts, so to speak, in a panel. And then, you can do the whole Zoom with me in San Diego, and I can do the whole Zoom with you in Florida or wherever in Colorado, and make it like a series of some sort. Just an idea.
You're muted, Mr.
Muted,
Oliver.
Mr. Oliver.
I think that's fine. It's easy to overthink the implement. It's easy to overthink the actual content and underthink the promotions piece of it, right? So you got to be careful not to do that. I'll tell you the other thing that should happen, Jan, is make sure you have a transcription of the thing, hand it off to an English teacher and have them clean it up into something readable. Now you have a free report that you can send out. You can give 5 copies of the free report, make it look like a little booklet. You can give that to all the parents to pass along to their friends. You make sure, the back cover is a 1 month free certificate in uniform. In other words, it's a guest pass. Is this giving you some ideas?
Yeah, and at the end of your seminar too, Master Lappin, you could also probably pull some testimonials. I'm sure you're going to get some raving reviews or feedback from some of the superintendents, teachers, what have you, and you could use that to pre-launch your next series or next one. That'll actually be a lead generator.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of your calls to action can be a free copy of your book, right? So.
Oh, yeah. My question is though, the stuff that I'm giving them is the stuff that I copied from Melody Johnson. So I have to be real careful. This is her material.
No. Reframe that for yourself.
Okay.
Here's Dan Kennedy's phrase. Buying 5 books for research and then creating your own, that's research. Taking one person's thing and then copying it, that's copyright infringement. So no, you use none of her slides, you have none of her direct verbiage, you use nothing, that's copyright infringement.
Okay.
But you take what, the base of what you liked with what she did, and there's a jillion other content out there online by people, by the way, who are more credible, better credentialed, and know what they're talking about more.
Yeah, she doesn't have any massive qualifications to teach any of the stuff that she taught
I
you.
know.
No, has no qualifications to teach.
Yeah, she has none. Yeah, exactly. So there is no anything. Now, yeah, you shouldn't use her slides and her logos and stuff.
Well, I don't have a slide or a logo.
Well, whatever.
I didn't know if that was improper it's good stuff.
There's nothing that is infringement on the concept, right? Yeah. If you went through and she has, 5 bullet points, and your 5 bullet points are exactly her 5 bullet points, and all you did was repeat verbatim what you heard from here. Yeah, that's theft, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't do to her what she did to ATA, right? So, so don't steal her stuff. But again, a little bit of research, and I bet you'll find some great quotes from former Secretary of Education or, PhD child psychologist, other Greg Moody's, and or from him, others that have legitimate credentials, right? But yeah, take an amalgamation of 4 sources or 5 sources, create your own order of the thing, and anything. And by the way, anything that you borrow, and it wouldn't be from her. Anything that you borrow, you find somebody who has a really good graph of really good data. Well, you just use that with attribution.
Mhm.
right? So you find somebody who has a great graph, an educator at Stanford did a research project, and here's the graphical representation. You just use that, but you make sure you give attribution, and you use it without modification, right? That would come with, pretty much within fair use, doctrine, right? So, fair use, I forget what it is. I can take a 7-second or 15-second clip out of a movie and,
Right.
I forget what the exact length is,
I
but
think it's-
fair use is using it, including in parody. Copyright infringement is I go dub off the latest Schwarzenegger movie and I'm selling it as I own the rights. That's copyright infringement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jan, on a project like that, if you guys are doing something like serious educational, in-depth stuff, especially for you, Jan, why don't you send me what you got? And then that's something obviously I'm interested in. That might be something I'd be interested in doing a podcast with you, and then maybe putting the material together. And it's not unlikely I have maybe a lot more educational actual resources that we could attribute and put stuff in there and add to it. If you do a draft of a PowerPoint, send those kind of things to me. That'd be something I might be interested in doing as a little bit of a project, and then we can give it back out to the group, which would be legitimate.
Yeah. And by the way, Melanie, Jan, this has nothing to do with Melanie. I think my third black belt was Dr. Lorenzo Trujillo, and he has educational credentials. He was the director of humanities for Jefferson County Schools, which is one of the biggest school districts in the country. He had a master's in education administration, a PhD in psycholinguistics, a master's in dance kinesiology, and a law degree, among other things. And, last time I looked at his curricular vitae, he had 22 academic texts and 9,832 academic published papers. We used to have conversations all the time about this with whatever martial artist at the time was running around like they were an expert in something they had not a clue about. My pet peeve for a long time has been the bullying thing, which Master Moody ironically did his PhD research thesis on. But the guy's running around inventing stuff because bullying was hot, and then you listen to what comes out of their mouth and you're going, oh my God, this is just ridiculous crap. It's it's backwards of what they should be teaching. And then oftentimes those same idiots in our industry would be going and talking to a PhD school principal, well studied in the topic, and just spouting gibberish at the guy, furthering the sense of disrepute of our industry rather than enhancing it. I was always very conscious of that, and I'm pretty damn well read, but I was
know your limits in what you know about and you don't, and also watch those webinars that we did on bullying prevention, ADHD, autism. Watch the webinars, because you're probably saying the wrong stuff if you haven't.
Yeah, exactly. But that was all in the context of rebuilding the Parthenon and having a bunch of crap going on. But see, Janet, an idea like that, right? It can be built into the pass along report, massive publicity, the schools driving real parents into it. So you're developing a prospect database, inviting them to get a free copy of your book, inviting them for the free introductory process, etc. It can, increase your celebrity status in the area by getting it promoted. And so many times what we do is we get narrow fixated on, oh, I can get the teachers to come to this thing. Well, yeah, but you can get the newscasters talking about the fact that you're doing this cool thing for the teachers. And by the way, as you do more research and you have stuff in the slides that are real experts, that have done real research, then it just dramatically enhances the level of credibility. When you get into the school systems, not so much at the front line, but certainly at the admin level, there are people who are real experts in a lot of this stuff. And, as soon as they smell somebody who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, it's always a bad sign to be that person.
Gotcha.
As a quick aside, it was always my number one training headache with my staff is the more, a lot of my staff like to pretend to be experts in everything and would, have a conversation. I remember once, I had this idiot program director, and good thing is he's very confident to go talk to anybody. He was good at doing enrollments, but you couldn't get him to shut the hell up about talking about things he had no idea about. And I walk into the school one time, and we had Harvard trained MD, world renowned cardiologist who worked for the VA doing whatever they call it, where they did the little ball through the thing. But he was an international renowned cardiologist, Harvard trained, one thing or another, who I think was the VA's lead cardiologist at the time. And I heard my idiot program director telling him all the things he knew about heart surgery. And, and I just kept sitting him down and said, look, when it's something you know nothing about, ask questions and be interested. You only have to be an expert in a couple things here. And the rest of the stuff, you don't have to be, I've got the idiot, brother-in-law who talks eloquently about being an expert in everything he talks about. And you never know. It's like, well, okay, he's kind of smart on some of this stuff, but everything that comes out of his mouth is suspect, because anybody who pretends to be an expert on everything, like Greg Moody pretending to be a relationship expert now, that's just
I say a relationship expert.
Couples counseling.
I am a licensed counselor, and I work with couples.
For some reason,
compared to you, sir, I don't think that we want to, do a comparison, but that's not the point of our topic today.
No. By the way, there's a great book called Sham, and I forget the order it is, but if in pop culture, the two most published and accomplished authors in relationship therapy, anybody have the names? Would you guess? Well, one is John Gray, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, etc. The other is Barbara DeAngelis, Resparking Love in Your Life, and one thing or another. I forget all of her titles, but she's got a jillion titles. He's got a jillion titles. If I remember correctly, she is his third ex-wife, and he is her fifth ex-husband, with a very acrimonious, bitter, and contentious divorce that continues to be bitter and contentious. And the key element of that is the two most pop culture relationship experts. One has been divorced 5 or 6 times, and the other has been divorced 3 or 4 times, including.
We don't recommend their books, sir. So good.
Plenty of experience.
Say it again.
Plenty of experience.
Yeah.
Hopefully, of doing the opposite of what they put in their books.
They've made every mistake, so they know what they are.
Okay.
Anyway, that's the topic.
Okay, but just to conclude, take the blank legal pad and ask yourself, one, if you're doing 20 things constantly to generate new students. Certainly that includes taking things that are currently home runs like Facebook and maximizing the conversion all the way through, right? But it also includes having a bunch of things where you only might get 1 or 2 students, having a whole variety of things that are going to create synergy among all of them, and making sure that you have expectations. The other side of it is like what we were just talking about, Jan, with your thing, is anytime you have something that you're running with, ask the question, how can this be repurposed, right? How can this generate publicity? How can this generate referrals? So is this something that can be a referral tool? Is this something that can be, expand our relationship with elementary schools? Is this something Domino's might promote by putting it on the pizza boxes? Is this something that, all the local orthodontists might promote for their kids? Is this something that, you think of all of the merchants, you think of the public organizations, the private organizations, but always kind of go through that list. How can I get publicity from it? What other organizations would love to be helpful? How can I use this as a referral tool? How many different ways can I repurpose this content? Go through that list. And, sometimes the reason you were doing it pulls okay, but then you hit a home run in the thing that wasn't the original reason to do it to begin with. Hey, before we go, Krista, are you still there? I see her picture.
Yes, I'm still here.
Hey, will you be sure and give Melissa our love and support? I know she's had a rough couple of weeks.
Yes, I will. She's actually out of the hospital now, so that I will for sure tell her.
Yeah, we're all thinking about her and hope a speedy recovery and less trauma than she's been experiencing.
Yes, thank you, sir.
You
I will
bet.
for sure pass that on.
Absolutely. On that note, any last questions or thoughts before we call it a day?
Master Oliver, I think it's just a fair point to make a point. What Master Lappin did was she just went ahead. She's always marketing. That's why she's always growing, right? And she had an idea and didn't sit on it, overthink it, and not take action. They just took action. That's why
Right.
she's constantly growing.
Yeah.
So we can always tweak and fix your results, but we really urge you just to take action and market.
Yeah, ready, fire, aim is never a bad idea.
Right.
And that's what you did with this one. You did ready, fire, aim, and that's fine. On things that you've done repetitively, I mean, do ready, ready, aim, fire. But on new things, sometimes it's better to get out the door, figure out what could have been done better, and then fix it at that point.
And the rooftop balloons somebody was asking about, we posted several of them on our Facebook group, but I think what was the latest one that we found that had them in stock that somebody just ordered?
Well, that wasn't the rooftop balloon. That was the kicker.
Yeah,
the kicker.
The kicker was Alibaba, and Alibaba is a good source for a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they also have the rooftop balloons.
Do they? The one I was thinking about, it's not hot air, but it's something where there's constantly blowing air. I guess that'd be the equivalent of the kicker guy. The ones we did were huge. We actually paid a company to come install them and put them up in one thing or another, and it was not inexpensive, but it was worthwhile. But you could certainly do something like that with the equivalent of the kicker things and get something that was huge. I would just be careful you don't put something that ends up blowing in the middle of traffic, causing a car accident.
Just chain it down.
Yeah, make sure that if you didn't know that, we have our own bounce house for the parties. In fact, there's a company that makes a really cool Oriental dojo looking bounce house.
Joe has one.
What?
Joe has one.
Yeah, good.
They
But
use that in front of the school all the time.
but my point is there was a spate of them blowing away with kids in them around the country. So it is one of those things, kind of like I have a trampoline in the backyard and it has blown across the property more than once, even though it's side down. So it is one of those things you have to be a little careful about. Okay, on that note, we'll call it a day. And just as always, broken record, get a bunch of stuff going on. And when enrollments are going well, do more marketing. Okay, thanks, guys.
Oliver, can you make me host? I'm going to talk to Steve for a few minutes.
Sure.
Thank you.
I can't, but Bob can.
Okay.
Done deal. Oh, and let me see, Master Smith, you might have to stop the recording. Maybe I can.
I can stop the recording strangely.